Among the main issues mostly discussed in Egypt's presidential campaigns, Israel and relations with this regime is of great significance to the public. All presidential hopefuls have clearly stated that they will revise the treaties reached under Hosni Mubarak. Karim Gamaluddin reports from Cairo.
Egyptian presidential hopefuls, without exception, have all said they intend to review the terms of Camp David, which are perceived as crippling. Leading candidates like Amr Moussa has said he would consider the peace deal with its existing conditions dead, while other presidential frontrunners like the Brotherhood's Mohammed Morsi and former Brotherhood member Abdulmenem Abul Futuh has mentioned they intended to modify Camp David.
This decision is not only for the president. It was in the past the president who ruling everything and who is taking every decision in the country. It was in the past, and now after the 25th of January revolution, it is the voice of the people, the voice of the parliament, the voice of the government or the cabinet and the president.
Observers say Egypt's presidential candidates have realized that Egyptian citizens who angrily stormed the Israeli embassy in September and who have always refused any form of normalization with the occupiers of Palestine and Arab lands are now as anti-Israeli as ever, feeling that the new Egypt should deal for once with Israelis and U.S. arrogance.
We will not accept the Camp David Accord, and the Zionist entity has to abide by the 1967 borders. And more importantly, they have to stop their extensive aggression against the people of Palestine.
Even the country's ruling junta has coordinated with the Israelis for increasing the number of Egyptian troops in Sinai border areas in order to fully control the volatile area. It seems that in the new Egypt, and for once, citizens and rulers alike will be on the same wavelength when it comes to the Israeli aggressor.
In line with the heightening anti-Israeli sentiments in Egypt, many here are hoping that Egypt's upcoming president will suspend all ties with Israel, expel the Israeli ambassador to Cairo, and halt all the gas exports to Israel. Karim Gamaluddin, Press TV, Cairo.
Elsewhere in South Korea, U.S.
from the presidential race. This comes despite the administrative court's attempt to reinstate a law that would ban ministers from Hosni Mubarak's era from running in the elections. Shafiq had been disqualified from Egypt's presidential elections in late April. His disqualification came after the disenfranchisement law was passed by Parliament and approved by the ruling military council. Egyptians will go to the polls later this month to elect a new head of state. It will be the country's first presidential race since the fall of the Mubarak regime in February of last year.
No way, after all of this blood that we have lost as Egyptians, that we will accept anyone from the old regime.
Hello and welcome to Press TV's special look at the run-up to Egypt's first presidential election. Sam Kabatakvi. We're going to be looking first at all the day's events from Egypt. Let's look at some of the top stories inside the country. Voting begins for Egyptian expats on Friday. Amr Moussa, Abdulmenem Abul Futuh face off in the first TV debate. The Electoral Commission refuses ban on Mubarak's Prime Minister Ahmed Shafiq despite disenfranchisement law. 4 new cabinet ministers take oath before junta's leader. And Egypt's vote faces a legal challenge as the administrative court orders the election to be suspended. And that was a look at some of the top stories as discussed in Egypt from different newspapers, along with obviously their domestic TV channels and probably some of the news publications from around the world. Well, right now it's time to take a look at the timetable that are behind the elections, or for you to get an idea at least when everything is going to go down in terms of the different dates that are involved. We're going to take a look at the wall here and see what we have here for a timetable. Well, the election campaign started on April 30th, as we've been bringing to you, and will end on May the 20th. And what we can see based on that is that the Egyptians abroad are going to be going to the polls, the expats, on the 11th through the 17th of May. Roughly about 10 million eligible voters there in the expat community. Egyptians inside the country will cast ballots on the 23rd and 24th of May, looking at roughly 80 million people, 40 million eligible voters for that. The winner is going to be announced on May the 29th, unless there's going to be a runoff, in which we're going to get into that. As it says there, elections will go to a runoff if no candidate wins over 50%. And it is said that it's going to indeed go into a runoff based on different percentages, which we will discuss a little later. Here, in terms of the timetable, we have the runoff election campaign to be run from May 30th through to the June 20th. And the transition and Egyptians abroad will vote also on the runoff on the 3rd through the 9th of June. We're going to look now at the transition, I believe, to civilian government coming up shortly to discuss how this is going to happen. Egyptians inside the country will vote in a runoff on 16th and 17th of May. Again, important for these dates, since we're going to be actually giving to you all the different events and results as they come and bring it to you here on Press TV. Runoff winner will be announced on May the 21st. With 23 candidates initially, of which 10 were disqualified. You're looking at 13 disqualified, looking at 10 really major candidates at this point. Now, the junta is scheduled to hand over power on June the 30th. Of course, we've heard this handover of power. We're going to discuss that shortly, whether they are going to do that or not. They took over power, as you're well aware, I'm sure, at this point, following Mubarak's downfall, of which, again, much criticism. If you remember, Egyptians were kissing them at some point after the downfall of Mubarak. But right now, it's a different story. Handover of power by junta, main demand of Egyptian protesters, as we have seen in the demonstrations that have happened in Tahrir or Liberation Square time and again every Friday especially. As to the transition of a civilian government, I believe that that's pretty much the summary of the major points. The handover seen as most significant outcome of the vote. Now, let's, before I get into discussing some of the events with our correspondents, don't forget that we're looking at a SCAF, the military council, who has said that they're going to hand over power when and if there's going to be a president that's elected. So we're going to have to wait and see if indeed that's going to transpire. Well, let's talk to